Run, that was the first word Lee Joonwoo ever whispered to her. Blood soaked through his white shirt, and nothing was ever the same again. Zara Williams had been in Seoul for exactly 6 weeks when her whole life changed in a single night. She still remembered the flight from Lagos, the way her hands shook as she filled out the immigration papers, the tight knot in her stomach that never really left. She had not come to Korea for adventure. She had come because her mother's hospital bills were piling up, because her younger brother needed school fees, because someone in the family had to be brave enough to leave everything behind. A housemaid position at a wealthy estate seemed like a miracle. Good pay. Private quarters. Meals included. She did not ask too many questions about the family. She should have. The Lee mansion sat behind tall iron gates on the outskirts of the city, half hidden by rows of pine trees that swayed like they were whispering secrets to each other. The first time Zara walked through those gates, something in her chest tightened. It was too quiet, too clean, too watched. Guards stood at every corner of the property, dressed in plain black suits, saying nothing, missing nothing. Black cars rolled in and out at strange hours of the night. The staff moved through the halls like ghosts, eyes down, voices low. Nobody laughed in that house. Nobody gossiped. Nobody explained anything. And every single one of them flinched whenever the name Lee Joonwoo was mentioned. Zara met him on her 3rd day. She was carrying a tray of tea into the study when the door opened and a tall figure stepped out, nearly knocking the tray from her hands. She looked up to apologize, the words caught in her throat. He was beautiful in the coldest way possible, sharp jaw, dark eyes that seemed to look straight through her, an expression carved from stone. He did not apologize. He did not even blink. He simply looked at her like she was furniture that had moved without permission. "Stay out of my way," he said. Then he was gone. Zara stood frozen in the hallway for a long moment, tea tray trembling in her hands. She told herself she hated him already. She was wrong. Over the following days, she began to notice things she was not supposed to notice. The way the housekeeper's voice dropped to a whisper whenever Joonwoo's father walked past. The way certain rooms on the 2nd floor were always locked, always guarded. The way Joonwoo himself seemed to carry an invisible weight on his shoulders, shoulders that never once relaxed, not even when he thought no one was watching. He was cold to everyone. But Zara began to suspect his coldness was not cruelty. It was armor. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered down to the kitchen for water. She heard voices from the private meeting room near the east wing, low, urgent. Tense, she should have turned around. Instead, curiosity pulled her 2 steps closer. Through the crack in the door, she saw men in dark coats setting black duffel bags on the table. She heard a name, a rival organization, a shipment that had gone missing, a warning about blood being owed. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought they could hear it. This was not an ordinary, wealthy family. This was something far more dangerous. She backed away slowly, her bare feet silent against the marble floor, and did not breathe until she reached her room. She lay awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling, replaying every strange detail she had ignored since arriving. The guards were not guards, they were soldiers. And the mansion was not a home. It was a fortress. By morning, she had made her decision. She packed her single suitcase with shaking hands, folding in the few clothes she owned, the photograph of her mother, the small Bible her grandmother had given her before she left Lagos. She was not going to stay another night in that house. She made it as far as the bottom of the staircase before a voice stopped her. "Where are you going?" Joonwoo stood in the hallway, arms crossed, studying her with an expression she could not read. "I am leaving," she said, lifting her chin so he would not see how frightened she was. "Why, I do not feel safe here." Something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger. Something closer to understanding. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said 4 words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "You should not be here." She did not understand what he meant. Not yet. That evening, the sky over Seoul turned a strange shade of orange, the kind of sunset that felt like a warning if you knew how to read it. Zara had unpacked her suitcase, unsure whether she was staying because she had nowhere else to go, or because some small, reckless part of her wanted to understand the man who had told her to run before she even knew there was danger. She was folding laundry in the staff quarters when the first gunshot cracked through the night air. For a moment, she thought she imagined it. Then came the second shot. And the third. Screaming erupted from the main house. Boots pounded against marble floors. Someone shouted orders in rapid Korean, panic bleeding through every syllable. Zara's whole body went cold. She dropped the laundry and ran, Not toward the noise, but away from it, deeper into the narrow hallway that led to the storage room, the only place she could think to hide. She pressed herself into the dark corner between shelves of old furniture, knees pulled to her chest, hand clamped over her own mouth to keep from making a sound. Outside, the gunfire did not stop. Glass shattered somewhere in the east wing. A man screamed and then went silent in a way that made her stomach turn. She had never been so afraid in her entire life. Minutes passed like hours. Then the door to the storage room creaked open. Zara nearly screamed. Joonwoo stood in the doorway, chest heaving, his white shirt stained dark red across the shoulder and down the front. Blood, so much blood. Her mind went blank with terror. "Joonwoo," she whispered, voice breaking. "Come with me," he said. There was no time for explanations. She could not move. Her legs had turned to stone. "Zara," he said again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Trust me." She did not know why she trusted him. She barely knew him. He had told her to stay out of his way only days ago. But something in his eyes in that moment was not the cold air of a criminal empire. It was a man afraid of losing someone he had only just begun to care about. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm despite everything, steady despite the chaos exploding around them. He pulled her through a hidden panel behind an old bookshelf, into a narrow passage that smelled of dust and stone, a tunnel that clearly had not been built for decoration. They ran, gunfire echoed above them, muffled by concrete and distance, but never far enough away to feel safe. Zara's lungs burned. Her heels slipped against damp stone. She did not stop. They emerged into a side alley 3 streets away from the mansion, gasping, hearts hammering. The city lights blurring around them like a dream that refused to make sense. Joonwoo did not slow down. He pulled her through back streets, past shuttered shops and sleeping taxis, until they reached a small, worn-down apartment building that looked like it belonged to a different life entirely. Only when the door locked behind them did he finally let go of her hand. Only then did Zara let herself collapse against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. For the first time, she looked at him properly, really looked, past the blood and the fear. He looked exhausted, haunted. "Human, are you hurt?" she asked, voice trembling. "Not mine," he said quietly, glancing down at the blood on his shirt. The words hit her like ice water. "Whose is it?" she whispered. He did not answer. Not that night. That night, he simply found a blanket, wrapped it around her shoulders, and sat across from her in silence until the sun began to rise. The following days blurred together in a strange, fragile peace. They stayed hidden in the small apartment, venturing out only when necessary, speaking only in low voices even though no one could hear them. Joonwoo cooked instant noodles on a portable stove, because it was the only thing in the tiny kitchen that worked properly. Zara taught him how to make jollof rice with whatever spices she could find at the corner store, laughing for the first time in weeks when he burned the first batch completely. Slowly, carefully, he began to talk. He told her about growing up in a house where love was measured in usefulness. He told her about a father who saw children as assets, not sons. He told her about the night he first understood what his family truly was, 12 years old, hiding behind a door, watching men in suits discuss violence like it was a quarterly report. "My family controls one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Korea," he finally admitted, staring at the floor instead of at her. Zara felt the air leave her lungs. "You are a mafia family," she said, the words tasting foreign and unreal. He nodded once, jaw tight. "And one day they expect me to take over," he added, voice hollow. She wanted to run. Every rational part of her screamed to run. But then she saw his hands trembling slightly against his knees. She saw the sadness buried so deep in his eyes that it had almost become permanent. "I never wanted this life," he whispered. And in that moment, Zara understood something that changed everything. Joonwoo was not the monster the whole city feared. He was a prisoner wearing the mask of a king. Days turned into weeks. The danger outside never fully disappeared, but inside those 4 small walls, something impossible began to grow. They talked for hours about nothing and everything, favorite foods, childhood memories, dreams they had buried so deep they had almost forgotten they existed. Joonwoo admitted he had once wanted to be an architect, back before duty replaced dreams. Zara admitted she used to sing in her church choir back in Lagos, though she swore she would never do it in front of him. He made her do it anyway. She hated him a little for that. She loved him a lot more. Somewhere between the burned rice and the stolen laughter, Between his quiet confessions and her growing trust, they fell in love without either of them daring to say the word out loud. He touched her hand one evening while showing her a scar on his knuckles, and neither of them pulled away. Neither of them wanted to. For the first time since Zara had arrived in Korea, she felt something close to home. But peace like that was never meant to last in a world like his. 3 weeks into hiding, there was a knock at the door that made every muscle in Joonwoo's body freeze, not the neighbor's knock. Not a delivery, a pattern, deliberate. Familiar, his face drained of color. "They found us," he whispered. Before Zara could ask how, the door burst open. Men in black filled the small apartment, and standing behind them, calm as winter, was a face Zara had only seen once before in an old photograph on the mansion wall. Joonwoo's father. His eyes moved from his son to Zara, and something cruel flickered across his expression. "So this is why my son has been playing house instead of taking his responsibilities," he said, voice smooth as silk and just as suffocating. Joonwoo stepped in front of Zara instinctively. "Let her go," he said. "This is between you and me." His father smiled, and it was the coldest thing Zara had ever seen. "No," he said. "Now it is between all three of us." They dragged Zara away despite Joonwoo's furious protests, despite the way he fought against 4 grown men just to reach her, despite the raw desperation in his voice as he screamed her name. She was thrown into a locked room somewhere deep inside a building she did not recognize, heart pounding, wrists raw from the restraints, praying to a God she hoped was still listening. Hours later, Joonwoo's father visited him with an offer wrapped in a threat. "Take your place as head of this organization," he said, "or watch the girl die." There was no third option offered. There never was in a family like this. Joonwoo returned to the mansion that night, but the version of him that walked through those gates was different from the man who had fled through the tunnel weeks earlier. His eyes held something new, not defeat, calculation. What his father did not know was that Joonwoo had spent every single night in hiding, memorizing names, dates, shipment records, hidden accounts, all the evidence he would need if he ever found the courage to burn the empire down from the inside. Now he had a reason to use it. He agreed to his father's demand, playing the obedient son, letting the older man believe he had won. But secretly, Joonwoo reached out to the handful of men inside the organization who had grown tired of the violence, tired of the fear, tired of watching good people disappear for the sake of profit. One of them was Han Sungmin, his father's most trusted enforcer, a man everyone assumed was untouchably loyal. He was not. Sungmin had lost his younger sister to a rival gang's retaliation years earlier, a death his father had allowed as acceptable collateral. He had been waiting for a reason to burn it all down too. Together, in absolute secrecy, they built a plan. Meanwhile, Zara sat in that locked room for 4 days, surviving on stale bread and the sound of her own heartbeat, refusing to let herself believe Joonwoo would not come. On the 4th night, chaos erupted through the building, shouting. Gunfire. The sound of a war finally arriving at its breaking point. The door to her room burst open, and for one terrifying second she did not know which side had found her first. Then she saw him. Joonwoo stood in the doorway, blood on his sleeve again, eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Relief broke across his face like sunlight through storm clouds. "Are you okay?" he asked, rushing to her side, hands shaking as he undid the restraints. She could not stop the tears. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you," he said, voice raw with emotion. "I would never leave you." Outside the room, the battle was far from over. His father, realizing his own men had turned against him, fought with the desperation of a man who had never once imagined losing control. The mansion that had once felt like a fortress of untouchable power became the battlefield where that power finally collapsed. Sungmin led the loyal faction against the remaining loyalists of the old regime. Evidence of years of crimes already in the hands of the authorities Joonwoo had quietly contacted days earlier. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every second. Joonwoo's father was arrested in the very study where he had once ordered so much suffering, dragged out in handcuffs past the son he had tried to control through fear and blood. He did not look at Joonwoo as he was taken away. Joonwoo did not need him to. In the weeks that followed, the organization that had ruled through terror for 2 decades finally crumbled under the weight of its own crimes. Joonwoo testified. He handed over records. He did something his father never expected him capable of. He chose to end it, even knowing it would cost him the only family he had ever known. The city that once feared his name slowly began to see him differently, not as a monster in waiting, but as the man who had the courage to burn down an empire built on suffering. It was not easy. People still whispered his family name with suspicion. Old enemies still watched him from the shadows. Rebuilding a life from ashes never happens overnight, but he refused to return to the darkness, no matter how many times it tried to pull him back. And through all of it, Zara stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had found something rare enough to be worth staying for. Months later, on a quiet evening, they stood together on a rooftop overlooking the glittering skyline of Seoul, the same city that had once tried to destroy them both. "I lost my family," Joonwoo said softly, staring out at the lights. He turned to face her. "But I found a home," he said. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, his hands trembling in a way Zara had never seen before. Not even during the gunfire, not even during the war. "Zara," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You came into my life as a maid," he opened the box. "But you became the woman who saved me," he whispered. He lowered himself to one knee, right there on the rooftop, city lights scattering like stars around them. "Will you stay with me for the rest of my life?" he asked. Tears blurred her vision before she could even form the word. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her trembling finger, and for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the future ahead of them looked bright instead of dangerous. Zara had come to Korea looking for nothing more than a paycheck and a way to save her family back home. Instead, she found a man who had spent his entire life surrounded by darkness, fear, and blood. And somehow, against every impossible odds stacked against them, together they found their way into the light.